Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I'm so grateful that you're able to join tonight. My name's Joss. I'm the curator and organizer of this series, and it's just wonderful to have you here to screen Cassils' 2016 short film, 103 Shots. For those of you who may not know, this film is part of an online exhibition entitled Being in Between Being, which showcases intermedia works by queer and women artists exploring aspects of identity related to in-betweenness. The exhibition artworks and catalog can be found at SUNY Buffalo's Laura Art Gallery website. I'll paste the link in the chat right now for your convenience. The exhibition also has a virtual event series of which tonight's screening is a part of. The next event will be this Friday, where we'll hear from painters Sam Moyer-Cardos about their work on representation and use of voyeuristic gaze. After the new year, there will be 3 more events, so do take a look at the schedule and descriptions on the website. Like many things this year, this exhibition went through several revisions, and originally, Cassils' 2-channel 2011 work entitled Fast Twitch, Slow Twitch was selected for the show. That work is a video installation that draws from their larger piece entitled Cuts, a Traditional Sculpture Body, which is a 6-month durational performance of disciplined body sculpting. The 2-channel film work juxtaposes footage from that duration, as one channel features slow motion images of Cassils swallowing raw eggs and choking on supplements, and the second channel is a time-lapse video of the artist's body, where 23 weeks of intensive bodybuilding are compressed into 23 seconds of muscular growth and physique sculpting. This was intended to be installed on opposite walls, where viewers would walk through a curtained enclosure and then be positioned in between the 2 channels simultaneously playing. With the revised online format, Fast Twitch, Slow Twitch was replaced with 103 Shots, which is a short film that responds to the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting. Though contrasting drastically from Fast Twitch in terms of content, 103 Shots addresses the exhibition's concerns about obscure modes of embodiment and experiences that evoke a state of in-betweenness. Inspired by the testimony of a survivor, where gunshots were first thought to be celebratory noises of fireworks or balloons popping, the film features a collage of pairs popping balloons between their 2 abdomens. For the sound, Foley recordings were used of balloons popping in a cement room, and the overall aesthetic draws from Grand Fury's Kissing Doesn't Kill campaign. Using over 200 volunteers in the Dolores Park on the day of San Francisco's 2016 Pride event, the film ultimately offers us 103 embraces, 103 shots, 1 for each life irreparably altered. As mentioned in some of the promotional material for this screening, an article by performance studies scholar and Cassils' artistic collaborator, Julia Steinmetz, was released to accompany this film text. For those interested, I'll paste the article in the chat as well. For now, I would like to preface our screening of 103 Shots with 2 questions and 1 insight that Julia Steinmetz provides, and perhaps we return to these after the screening, or they just help guide some of your thinking about the film. The first question is, in moments of instability and perceived threat, there is a powerful impulse to clarify the boundaries between friend and enemy, us and them, but who exactly is the we that is invoked when speaking of the LGBTQ community? The second question is, what politics will emerge from the bloodied floors and punctured walls of Pulse from the dreams and desires of Latin night at the gay bar? And then the insight, which she draws from queer performance scholar Jose Esteban Munoz at the end, and asserts, attunement toward the potential of a better world has the power to create another reality, to become the scene of a passionate and complex politics. So with all of this fresh in our heads, we'll now begin the screening. Since 103 Shots is just over 2 minutes with including the credits, I'll play the film twice without any pausing. During the first viewing, you might consider or record first impressions, and with the second, you might focus on a particular aspect of the film that caught your attention in the initial viewing. Of course, as the material may be a bit uncomfortable to endure, feel free to mute or step away from your screen if needed, especially with the second viewing. Again, thank you for joining us tonight, and I look forward to learning what impressions and insights come about for you. Let us begin. And some of us may recognize this is drawing from the Queer Nation typography as well. So we have the Grand Fury, Kissing Doesn't Tell campaign or kill. And then we have also this Queer Nation reference as well. So I'll begin the second viewing and then we can discuss. All right. If anyone would like to share a first impression, or especially in comparison to maybe first viewing, second viewing. Otherwise, I have a question to maybe start us off regarding the sound. I'm very curious how you reacted or kind of interpreted the use of sound, especially with this particular technique of being the balloon dropping in a cement room, isolated. It's very kind of sobering. So if you want to respond to sound, I've got a question for you, but if you want to share other thoughts, please do.
Yeah, actually, hi. The sound is striking. You know, in combination with the poses and the actions. I was just curious as to why she didn't keep the sound in for the remaining, or not she, I mean, whoever, the, I'm sorry, I'm not organized here.
Okay, we can come back to if that's helpful.
No, it's just why the sound cut out through the rest of the balloons popping, because I think that was such a strong element. It's interesting. I mean, the silence is also very strong, but I was wondering if you were aware of what that choice might have been.
In terms of when it's spliced, when it's layered, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a sound, and initially you hear the popping sounds, and maybe this is just my hearing of it, and then as the film goes on, you don't hear the popping sounds. You just see the actions going on. Is there a psychological reasoning for that, or is that do you know, or is this just something we can discuss amongst ourselves here?
Sure. From my understanding, since I think the heart of this work was intended to show the disorienting effects of violence in intimate spaces. And so I think literally that disruption of sound and image, I think maybe perhaps contributes to that kind of disorienting.
Yeah.
And also like an intimacy that we don't get to access all the way. We just get the visual. So I think there's also potentially thinking about because this was a mass shooting, you know, public context, and the film was in public, but then we have these small intimate moments too. And so I think there's individual to community access, I think might be played there. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
interesting about the layers. When you were first sharing, I was thinking about when the sound starts to kind of collapse and be cut off to more
yeah,
sharply resemble, the gunshot um, sound. And like that's when my heart started racing and I started feeling it more in my body. Whereas before, I think I was being very guided and welcomed in to these kind of, we don't really know what's going on necessarily or this pattern yet. And that's kind of when I felt kind of paralyzed to have to keep
right,
engaging, but not really, but kind of fearful, right, of what's going to happen, what's going to be the crescendo. Am I in it? Is this the crescendo itself? So yeah, thank you for sharing so much. I'm obsessed with sound in this piece for sure.
yeah,
Anyone?
it's key, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And just the context too of mistaking gunshots for celebration noises
Mhm.
has that eeriness, that you just can't shake.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to keep my video off because I'm just like cutting in and out.
Sure.
But yeah, this was fantastic, and thanks for organizing this, Jazz. Um, I was really struck by. I agree with everything you said about sound, and I was also very struck by just like the sharpness of the pitch, and both sound, loud sounds, and the absence of sounds. Just the stark difference of the two experiences. But I was also thinking about how that's also reflected, and sometimes um, also I think opposed to a certain extent in the visual that you see, because there is that black and white sort of sharply contrasting effect of the visual, but like the placing of the bodies, sometimes like the bodies are facing each other, their eyes are closed, and there's an expression of pain on both faces. But then there are moments where they're looking at you, both actors, both bodies are facing the camera, and they're looking at you. Sometimes there is a joyous smile on the face, a sacrificial smile on the face. So you kind of like that sort of rattles you, and you don't know how to sort of settle into the experience. And that's definitely one of the intentions of the piece, is to really sort of shake you up. And so I was thinking if you guys might have any thoughts on just the relation between the visual and sound in this piece.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. It makes me think of Mark's comment of going back to we get silence, but then we get image, and then sometimes we get sound without the image. So I just keep looping back to this idea of lack of full access. Dana, did you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, I was just writing down the last thing you said, Joss, in terms of access. Yeah, I was thinking about, I was really drawn to the sound, but also like I was thinking about risk and how like in terms of like thinking of in betweenness, it's risk, like just the concept of risk is something that people are more accustomed to. So like sometimes I didn't mind that I couldn't hear. Sometimes I was waiting for the sound to come back, even though I'm afraid of balloons. Because of what you were talking about earlier about the implications of very abrupt, loud sounds usually are involved with some form of violence. So like it was reminding me of like the risk of being in these spaces of pleasure, knowing that like it's kind of like a microcosm, like a little like snapshot of kind of like always making this risk to enter spaces of pleasure with with being from like marginalized identities and and keeping those marginalized spaces safe. That's just one thing.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, risk even at the basic level of being quote unquote out or not, and then in which spaces are you actually out, and then in which spaces can you actually engage in different types of pleasure and different types of representation with threats of violence and fear and yeah, absolutely. Jiwan or Azalea, any thoughts?
Okay. You're making me do this.
I'm inviting and encouraging.
I mean, I think that a lot of people already said all of the things that I've been thinking about. it's also about, the fact that the whole video was, black and white, gray, and how with like the queer identity, there's like this symbolism of the rainbow, right? Which is actually like very colorful. But the fact that, this whole video was shot and like, that grayscale, I think that also kind of like went with the whole situation of, like not knowing, like being at a club also, it's like really dark in there. So you basically really don't know what's going on. And like everything is loud. So yeah, I was thinking that it kind of aligned with that what is going on situation.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I don't think we've ever necessarily seen a black and gray pride parade. It's very antithesis for sure of that theme. I'm very curious how, I know we all kind of come from different backgrounds in our works, and some of us study art, some of us are artists. I'm curious what this film makes you think about your own practice, your own work, your own research. Are there any kind of productive thoughts that have come out of this viewing?
Well, for me.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go, Dana.
All right, Mark and then
All
Dana.
right. Okay. For me, I mean, it's striking. It's, the sound in particular. I rarely ever work with sound. Well, I do actually. I shouldn't say that, but not in the same venue or not in the same way that this was using sound. One of the things, that I was struck by, and this might be because I'm older or whatever, the film styling, the black and white itself, which I found just gorgeous. And it was, it's very stylized, it's very beautiful. And it reminded me of Bruce Weber's work back in the was it probably the 90s or so. Are you familiar with his works? He was a photographer. Yeah. I mean, the very sensual bodies, and embracing and very sort of about the body type of thing. It was an interesting. That's the connection I made because of the way the visuals were shot. In my opinion, the way I saw it in my, like you're saying, our own past histories and how we are influenced by these things. And I just found that really intriguing in multiple ways. And I'm not sure exactly even why at this point, but it was gorgeous. Which is in some ways in and of itself is weird, right? Because it's a very, very disturbing subject matter. And yet it comes out as very slick and beautiful, and but with these sharp, disturbing moments through it, right?
That's a wonderful point to make about the relationship to kind of photography, black and white portraiture, just even choosing stills to put into the catalog and promote the event. I mean, there was just such an array to choose from because they are, each frame is quite gorgeous by themselves. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that stunning white background too, right?
Mm-hmm. Which,
So,
and then you hear it's in a park, it's in this public shared space, but you
right.
would probably think a studio from the beginning, without
Yeah.
that information. So now we have even public space is deceptive here, or being represented in new ways. That's
Yeah.
also quite interesting. Yeah, Dana, did you want to share your thought from earlier?
Oh, I was thinking about like how to play around with technical, not difficulties, but like I was thinking of like the first viewing, I was like, what's going on with the volume? Did Joss turn down the volume? And I was like really giving that some attention. And then I was like, oh no, this is like, we're good. This is exactly how it's supposed to sound. And like kind of disrupting being able to like hear or see things clearly. So like going back to what you said and also what Jiwon mentioned about disorientation, like playing in like creating pieces that are or art, like just thinking about how to reach people or like how to tell story differently, like thinking about how to play with uh, imagery or how to kind of play around with understandings of what we're supposed to be hearing. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about just since watching this a minute ago.
Yeah, thank you. And that was something I wanted to get to is the duration is so important too. It's a very brief film. So I'm curious, with that, we can of course think about viewer experience, but then also the content and the artwork itself. Curious how you're receiving it, how you interpreted it, how it maybe reinforces some of the other elements that stuck out to you, or what other kind of takeaways you're getting. Because it is quite jarring how brief it is.
Is there a significance to the time? Is that how long the shooting lasted for, or is
I
it just
haven't
something
read that
else?
in the research. I've only read the number of shots, number of
Right.
embraces. But I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember how long that event was. I think it was longer though, because so many people were mistaken that it was actually happening. It took a while for the realization. So I don't know. But that's a great question. But I mean, potentially also supports the general understanding of a mass shooting being quick, uh,
Hmm.
being immediately gut-wrenching, and impactful. Yeah, great question.
Well, time does sort of alter when you're in an event like that too, right?
Right.
So, everything speeds up and slows down almost simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. No, I think the length, I enjoyed the length. I thought the length seemed to be appropriate, because I'm not sure you could drag something like that out for an extended period of time before being affected in a very, very different way, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
And if some of you were able to attend the talk yesterday, that made me think of Julia Rose Sutherland mentioned the mass media and how it has the numbing effect with police brutality. And if we had this longer, film, potentially that numbing effect would also be part of our experience. And talking about that disorienting in the moment, time slows down and speeds up. I was thinking of Dana's earlier comment about risk and what panic does with this.
Right.
It was 2 seconds or 2 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime, kind of, layered, dense, emotional, affective kind of response there. Absolutely. Well, yeah, Dana, hop in.
Just one last thing, because you said layers. I was thinking about also in connection with like duration and like how it's kind of stacked, you know, it's like heavy. So like maybe like thinking of it texturally, like, because time is really tricky now, I think, in terms of like events having a life, like, because that's, you know, history, I guess. But like, yeah, like just kind of thinking about like the heaviness of something, or some of the images, like I think it was Abibsha mentioning the smile, like some of those images I felt like a softness, and that made me confused a little bit because I know I kind of thought, so like there's like moments of tenderness and these moments of fear.
Mm-hmm.
That's so like thinking about how it's like the textures are working together, and each shot could be like interesting to think about, like film and also photography, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I think about the performative of, you know, in a fearful, panicky thing in a public space, you grab onto a stranger's hand, right? And you have these odd moments of intimacy. We all gasp at the same time. Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to think about it with these layers and textures. Thank you so much for that. Are there any other concluding thoughts? I don't want to, you know, drag this on too long, but I wanted to provide a forum, a space for some thinking together. And I've been so grateful to hear some of your thoughts already. But if there's any others to share.
Actually, I do have one quick question, I think, is like, it has to do with this sort of idea of how the way we view something influences the way we react. Like you were talking about social media, and you know, when we were talking with Julia yesterday, and that sort of approach. Do you know how this was originally presented?
You know, I can't remember if it was like in a film festival or not. I can't remember. Yeah, it's a good question.
It just seems, you know, that on a large projection of this, it would be just so striking, right? It would have that sort of physicality that sometimes gets lost when we're looking at our own personal computer screens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's a brilliant piece. And I think, you know, the way it could be presented is another thing. I mean, again, you know, these are all these sort of variables that always play into our interpretations of information. So
Yeah. Well, and so the piece that the text that was paired with it, Julia Steinmetz's article that's linked to the chat, that actually went on to be published in an edition of QED, the Journal of GLQ Worldmaking, and that there was a whole issue on dedicated to this event and a bunch of writing. And so there's a blurb by Cassils in there that does talk about this piece, and then a couple of other artists have work in there, and there's even poetry. Alexis Pauline Gumbs has a piece in there. So, you know, in terms of wanting, if you want some more research and how this has connected into a larger web, I think even that issue in and of itself would be like a great place to start, because Cassils definitely, of course, was not the only one producing in response to this. And so it's of course a part of a larger conversation, and it's interesting to watch it, you know, almost 5 years, 4.5, 5 years later. And now we're in a pandemic context. So, I mean, when's the next time we can go to a gay bar? I don't know, you know, it's a little bittersweet too, this idea of the even embracing, right?
yeah.
Public celebration, parades. I didn't want to make that the theme of tonight's discussion. I wanted to provide some reprieve. But I think, you know, in preparing for this exhibition, I did review that issue, and I just found that really helpful to kind of contextualize a lot of it, and also realize the other conversations that were going on, especially other queers of color, you know, people who had visited that nightclub, et cetera. Yeah, there's a wealth of information, of course.
I was just wondering real quick, did you find any discussion or I mean, the articles that you're referring to, anything about like revealing the source of sound in this video, like, you know, the view's balloons, right? So there is that sense of like wonder and the ridiculousness also, right? And the sheer horror and fright associated with that, just like how pleasure sort of seamlessly becomes horror. Is there any discussion that you came across? I mean, how would our experience of watching the video be different if we didn't know the source of the sound was balloons, you know, as the video shows us?
Right.
It's just a thought.
Yeah, that's a great thought. And in the issue that I'm referencing, there wasn't any other work besides the Julia Steinmetz piece, I believe, that's on this particular work. And Steinmetz does talk about our kind of like PTSD hypervigilancy and that kind of state. So the article might be helpful with that. But that is a fantastic idea of, you know, the dark club, as Juan mentioned. We don't know the source of the sound. And then if, you know, we also don't know the source of this sound, adding to that horror. Absolutely. And I think because we also are limited in our vision with the black and gray setting, I think, you know, there's some nod to not necessarily noir, film noir, but a little bit of that mystery potentially adds to what we're picking up in the sound. Absolutely. Any other thoughts or questions to end on tonight? Well, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the film. And so it is streamable on the exhibition website, so you can rewatch it. And there's going to be a catalog on the website. And so there's an essay on Cassils on this piece too to explore. But Friday we have the painter Sam Moyer-Cardos to tune into, and they're going to be talking about queer representation and the voyeuristic gaze. So do come back, same meeting code, same password, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Any questions for me before we sign off today? All right, well, thank you everyone. Stay safe and take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.